noted as withdrawn on the agenda. The procedure for the meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda are found on the front right podium. For each case, the planner with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation. Following the staff presentation, the applicant will present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, the board will hear first from those speakers in support of the application, then from those speakers in opposition to the application, and then finally the applicant will have an opportunity to provide rebuttal. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chair. If a member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support of or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out a speaker's card for the record. Speaker's cards are available at the front podium. Once filled out, speaker's cards can be submitted to any DPD staff planner at the left podium. We do not need speaker's cards from the applicant since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. Pursuant to the board's rules of procedure, the time allotted for speakers will be as follows. The applicant has 5 minutes to present his or her case. The applicant may reserve unused time for his or her rebuttal. Those speakers in support of the application have 5 minutes. This 5 minutes is the total time allotted for support testimony, regardless of the number of speakers. Those speakers in opposition of the application have 10 minutes. This 10 minutes is the total time allotted for opposition testimony, regardless of the number of speakers. The applicant has 2 minutes for rebuttal in addition to any unused time for his or her presentation. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chair may provide additional time provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. If the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing pursuant to the board's rules of procedures. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and or rebuttal. All motions by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 90 days with the consent of the applicant or 30 days without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st of 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases are filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish a consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should make their objection known by a show of hands when the Secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on that agenda as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on those cases. Mr. Secretary, which items today are eligible to be placed on consent?
Item number 3, BOA 23-028, 4480 Westmont Road. Item number 4, BOA 23-030, 620 Lauderdale Street. Item number 6, BOA 23-036, 3667 Lamar Avenue. Item number 8, BOA 23-040, 1212 Valentine Avenue, with a friendly amendment to condition number 6, where it reads a variance to allow a maximum, that would be a minimum, of 158 on-site parking spaces for the first 3 tenant spaces, and the future parking garage shall be illustrated on the final site plan to accommodate a minimum of, and it reads as 536, that will be changed to 474 parking spaces. Item number 9, BOA 23-045, 4715 New Allen Road. Item number 10, BOA 23-046, 975 South McLean Boulevard, and that is a 1-month hold. Item number 14, BOA 23-051, 709 West Suggs. 17, BOA 23-054, 10854 Millington Arlington Road. Item number 18, BOA 23-055, 1432 Harvard Avenue. And item number 19, BOA 23-056, 1757 Wilson Road.
And that last one was 19?
Yes.
Okay, so I have 3, 4, 6, 8 as amended, 9, 10 as a whole, 15, 17, 18, and 19?
And 14 as well.
14, okay, thank you. Knew I missed one. Okay, so if we could get a motion to approve agenda, or the consent agenda, which is 3, 4, and 6 as conditioned by staff, 8 as conditioned by staff and as amended, 9 is conditioned by staff, 10 as a hold, and then 14, 15, 17, 18, 19 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Before we vote, I'm going to remind you, by voting on the consent agenda, you are saying that you've read these cases and are in agreement with the conditions. And Mr. Secretary, if you'll give us a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Bostic?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Chair Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank y'all. If you are here for those cases we just put on the consent agenda, you've either been approved or held as requested, so you're free to go. Mr. Secretary, will you call our first case we're going to hear today?
Item number 5, BOA 23-035, 2117 Peabody Avenue.
All right, is the applicant present? Yeah. Is there any opposition here? There is. Come down to the front. And Mr. Thomas, can you give us a staff report on this?
Good afternoon, Seth Thomas with the Memphis Shelby County Office of Planning and Development. Case before us is BOA 2335 at 2117 Peabody Avenue at the Midtown Slider in location. So this will be a mouthful here. We've got a variance from paragraph 8.4.10C2 to allow a dumpster enclosure in front of a principal structure. Then we need a variance from subsection 3.10.2B for parking within a required 8-foot front yard setback from the street. Section 4.3.3 for not meeting the required streetscape. Items 4.5.5D1A and D2A. And D3 for not meeting the required interior perimeter landscaping islands. Paragraph 4.6.7E3 to allow barbed wire fence in the CMU3 district, and paragraph 4.6.7E4 to allow an uncoated chain link fence that is also not part of an evergreen landscape buffer. The site's about 0.3 acres, and the existing zone is commercial mixed use 3. Here's an aerial of the site, right at the corner of Peabody and South Cooper. This is the zoning map. The surrounding zoning is a mixture of commercial to the east, north, and south, and then residential as you move west. Here's the land uses that surround the property, kind of indicating what I just said. And then here are some site photos. So on the left and the right, this is a view of both the fence, the dumpster, and the grease trap that are currently located at the corner of Peabody and Cooper. And then here's a view from the internal parking lot, and also the view of the subject property's fence along the rear of the parking. And here's just another photo of the dumpster and grease trap. So this is the view of the subject property in 2019 before the new parking area was constructed. As you can see, at some point in time, they did have, I don't want to say it's necessarily a by the UDC landscape plate, but they did have some plants surrounding the dumpster. And when the parking lot was constructed, those were removed or maybe killed as a result of the asphalt. This is the site plan that was provided by the applicant showing their intention to enclose the dumpster and indicating that it is at least partially outside of the site triangle of the Peabody Avenue and Cooper Street intersection. And here's a more detailed version of the dumpster enclosure plan. So there's multiple relevant Unified Development Code clauses that are sort of indicated in this request by the applicant. Generally, they're all surrounding the parking lot that was built and the location of the dumpster and the various issues that resulted from that parking lot being built without a permit or an ASPR that would be generally required for something like that. So in conclusion, the applicant is seeking relief from a myriad of paragraphs and items in relation to a new parking area, and they're also seeking relief to allow a dumpster enclosure in front of a principal structure. Staff feels that the size of the site allows the property owner to conform with the zoning code without the need for the variance approval, and staff feels that there is not really a hardship or practical difficulty presented by the applicant that justifies approving this variance. As such, staff is recommending rejection, but if approved, we have the following conditions. City engineering has to ensure that the enclosure does not fall within the site triangle. The existing fence along the southern property line must be replaced with a wooden fence or a coated chain link fence without concertina wire as part of an evergreen landscape plate. The fence facing South Cooper must be removed and replaced with a streetscape plate subject to administrative site plan review. The grease trap has to be moved to the interior of the lot somewhere adjacent to the existing principal structure, and any deviation from the site plan will be submitted to the Board of Adjustment for approval. That concludes my presentation, and I'm open for any questions.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Thomas?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know you can't make every one of these cases a history research project, but I'm just wondering if you know the first time that dumpster showed up in that location.
Going back as far as Google Maps as I could tell, it's basically been there since Google Maps has driven around that particular intersection. I think it dates back to 2015. I just included the most recent iteration before the parking lot, but it seems, at least from Google Maps, that it had always been there. Whether it was there continuously or whether they moved it and moved it back, or it was, it's not something that I guess I'm liable to answer, but that's sort of my understanding of it.
Okay, I have one more question, and I know the answer to this, but some of the other board members may not be as familiar with the regulations. You say more than 9 spaces in the expanded parking lot is what triggered a lot of this. And I believe that's 3.10, right, is where that regulation is in the general development standards?
I believe you're correct, yep.
Wanted you to explain that, why it's more than 10 and where that regulation comes from and so on.
Well, I mean, as far as where it comes from specifically, I guess I'd have to get into the mind of our former zoning administrator to understand why he did that. But in reality, the larger the parking lot, right, the more that it's going to affect the streetscape. And so a decision was made that if you're going to build a parking lot over a certain amount of cars, that's going to affect the streetscape enough that you would be required to do an administrative site plan review as part of an application for the building of the said parking lot. And so that unfortunately was not done by the applicant, and so they built this parking lot without an ASPR, which kind of allowed these nonconformities with the zoning code to exist.
Okay, one more question. The requirement for administrative site plan review, where does that come from?
I believe it would come from the section 3.10.b. and just our ASPR section in general. So we have a chart that triggers the ASPR. So it would be subsection, 3.10.2B, as that's the more than 9 spaces
Okay,
language.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that. There hasn't been any citations yet, right, of the dumpster or anything like that? Is this just the first time we're being aware after the creation of the parking?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, if the applicant will come forward. And you know the drill.
Cindy Reyes, SR Consulting, 5909 Shelby Oaks Drive, Suite 200.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, Cindy.
Ms. Baker, to answer your question, I think that the landscaping that was around the dumpster previously, I think when they widened Peabody and made that specific turn lane and put the island in the middle, I think that might be when that landscaping got removed.
When the dumpster, are you saying that, oh, okay,
Yeah,
thank
when
you.
they widened Peabody, I think everything got changed.
Do you know when that happened?
When they widened Peabody, we don't. It's been a few years, evidently, since after that picture, so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. This is for Slider Inn, and if you put up the site plan or your map that shows the 2 parcels. There's actually 2 parcels here, and one parcel is for Slider Inn, and they are working with the adjacent property owner who owns both parcels to work out a purchase agreement, which would make my site plan, everything in my site plan would be able to change. And the reason that we filed it the way that we did was we were filing it just on the Slider Inn, their current lease property. The Masons had built the parking and the fencing, and that was not done as a part of them. They actually did that and as an agreement. So what we would hope is that the board would give us an opportunity to close on the land. I have the Masons and their representative here if anybody has any questions for them, but I think that we could work with staff and clear up a lot of these discrepancies that we have if they are able to purchase both pieces of property. And we would like the board to give us the time to purchase the property and revise the site plan.
How much time do you think you need? When, do we have a contract yet or anything?
We are very close to a contract.
Okay.
I would say that we would probably have the contract by next week and then close within 30 days. So if we could have a
Would you wanna-
2-month.
And we can hold
30 days.
Brett, we can hold it for 2 months at their request, correct?
You can hold it up to 90 days with their consent or 30 days without their consent. So we have held it once already, correct? So
Yeah,
we would have 2 more holds. So you can
we
hold it
held-
for 2 months.
So 2 months will work, okay.
Okay.
Well, okay. So hearing that, is there a motion from the board to hold this case for 2 months? And so until the August meeting? No,
So
July
moved.
meeting. Moved, seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I assume you're ready to vote. All those in favor of a 2-month hold signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, it passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Ragsdale, can you call our next case for us?
Item number 12, BOA 23-048, 1631 Colonial Road.
All right, see the applicant's coming down. Is there any opposition to this case? Okay. Ms. Cobb, if you can give us a staff report, please.
Thank you, Kendra Combs, Division of Planning and Development. So this is a variance request for 1631 Colonial Road. The applicant is Abel Rocham, and it is a variance request from paragraph 2.7.2B1 to not allow an accessory structure taller than the principal. So this is a map of the area where the property is located. It is in the Colonial Acres neighborhood. The zoning is residential single-family 6 or R6, and it is surrounded by single-family properties. Photos of the site. So to the left, we have a picture of the principal structure, the single-family home. And then the photo to the left shows the two-story structure that's being built in the rear. And these are pictures of the site, 1631 Colonial Road, and you can see the two-story structure in the backyard. And then also, this is a view looking northwest on Colonial Road. The site plan shows the principal dwelling or the single-family home in the front, and the two-story structure shows that it's set back 51 feet, almost 52 feet from the single-family home. The rear setback is 5 feet and 7 feet on the side, and that is the northern property line. Here are elevations of the two-story accessory. And so we have a detached garage at the ground floor, that's 334 square feet, and then storage for the upper story, 267 square feet. And floor plans of the ground floor and then the upper story. So to conclude, this is a request to allow the accessory structure to be taller than the principal. The principal structure is a single-family home, while the accessory structure is 2 stories. An application for a building permit for this accessory was submitted on March 2nd. However, the construction had already been substantially started at this point, and Google Street View shows the structure dating back to February. Staff does not see that there is a hardship that would require or would allow a variance to be granted for this. Also, the accessory structure is visible from the street, from the sidewalk, and from Colonial Road. So staff recommends rejection. However, if this is approved, we recommend the following conditions: that if anything changes from the site plan, then that would have to be approved by DPD or the board. Also, the accessory structure should be compatible with the architectural character of the single-family home. And if any portion of the structure is over 20 feet, then the structure shall be located at least 20 feet from the side and rear property lines. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Cobb?
Is there a max height for any accessory structure? Or does it just have to be shorter than the primary structure? Is that the only requirement?
There is a max height. I can look in, or actually, I'm sure Mr. Ragsdale will be able to answer.
Sure, yeah, it is no higher than the principal structure. Of course, if the principal structure is taller than 20 feet, anything within 20 feet of a side property line has to be no taller than 20 feet tall.
I don't see any measurements on the elevations. Do we know how tall it is?
That information was not provided, but we do have the applicant here.
Okay.
And I'm sure they will be able to answer that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I have another question. If you go back to the site plan, is there a drive that goes back to this? I don't see it. Maybe I missed it. I don't see a drive that goes back to that.
It doesn't appear that there is one. The only driveway looks like it's what is existing for the home.
So it looks like there's a garage, but there's no way to get to it with a vehicle. Is that right?
That's what it appears.
Okay. I was just wondering. I thought maybe I might have missed something.
So this is an actual image that I have up, and there's a fence that is pretty much in the view of the accessory structure, so I don't believe that there is a driveway currently.
Okay.
It doesn't appear that there is one.
They don't even look wide enough to be a
All right, any other questions of staff?
Is it a garage or is it intended to be used for some other purpose?
The intent is, as stated in the application, to be a garage on the ground floor. The upper story is proposed to be storage. Storage for, I think, work equipment, and in the application it stated work equipment and also furniture.
My last question would be, if you go back to that site plan, I know you mentioned a side setback of 7 feet. Is it problematic that the stair encroaches in that, or since that's not considered a permanent structure with the stair, that's not included in the setback for the side? I don't know if that's necessarily directed to this case. I was just curious because I saw that 7-foot dimension on the.
Right. I believe that the stairs it can encroach into the setback.
Okay. I want to make sure. All right.
Okay. Other questions? All right, if the applicant will come up.
And we do have DPD staff, Magali Ramirez, to translate if necessary.
Okay, very good. If the applicant will come up and they can ask for the translator, we will if we need to. Thank you. All right, if you can give your name and address for the record.
Abel Martínez, 1631 Colonia Road.
Okay.
Abel Martinez, 1631 Colonial Road.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, go ahead.
Pues nomás que lo tuyo lo hice para usar para guardar cosas porque no tengo dónde guardar cosas.
So he is saying that he does not have, he's very limited to storage in his principal home, so he did it not knowing that he needed a permit or wasn't aware of the height. But he's basically just using it for storage.
Okay. Is he going to store a car in there?
No, only furniture and,
So
tools.
it's got a garage door, but it's still a storage unit, basically.
Sí, nada más, sí, nomás la dije para.
Basically, just so he can put big furniture stuff, but it's
Okay.
no cars.
Does it have power, electrical?
It does not.
Okay. And then can I ask, what does he do for a living to store all this stuff?
Yo me en la construcción.
He does construction.
Okay.
So that clears up a lot. So if the garage first level is storage as well, would not having the upper storage level be a detriment to the amount of storage space for his job?
Es que tengo muchas cosas, o sea, tengo muchas cosas que guardar. Ropa. A veces la ropa que tengo de los niños que sobra para que le quede a otro la guardo. Recién.
So he believes not, he just needs that much of storage space.
Just additional storage space, okay.
Would,
He has kids, so he wants to have that storage for kids as well.
okay. Quick question for staff. Had he just made this all one level, and of course gotten a building permit, because anything with like a permanent roof needs a building permit, could he have built it 600 square feet?
No pasa de los 20.
Yes,
Okay,
one level, yes.
one level, okay.
I have another question, and Chairman Rainey asked this question before, but I missed the answer. How tall is this structure?
So he is not for sure. He says that it is less than 20 feet. He would estimate, say, 16 feet.
It is 20 feet?
It's more
No,
like
it's
16.
around 16 feet height.
Well, you got a dimension right here. For the stairs, you can kind of, this is
Oh,
8 feet, plus the railing is 3, so that's 11,
Got that.
at least to that. So let's just say it's 9 feet to the top, plus the door. If the door is a 7-foot door, that's 16 to right here.
How tall is his home?
It doesn't look like it's gonna be 20, though. It definitely looks under 20.
You might be, I'm thinking 18, give or take.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah,
of
go ahead.
clarity. How tall is the primary residence?
That's really the kicker, right?
They brought their neighbors as well. Can they speak on behalf?
Yeah, just a second, yeah. I mean, it can't be more than
Ms. Ramirez, if we
15.
can have them fill out speakers.
The
cards.
primary looks like it's about
So if you do want
At
to
the most.
speak.
It's got the lower
as
roof
board
on it,
officers,
you know?
Just grab a card and
About
fill it out,
15,
please.
so they could do
At
something
most.
up to
Up to 15.
15 feet.
I think, well, I just wanted to, since the question was how tall is the primary and then also how tall is the accessory, that really wasn't something that, I dug into, seeing that, it is a one-story principal structure, and therefore, per our code, you can't have anything that exceeds, an accessory structure can't exceed can't have an additional level, considering that it is a single-story, single-family home.
Yeah, I get that, but I want to help them understand the concept of where it should have been versus, kind of lecturing or beating them up on how high it is now, where it should have been or where they could go, can probably help them too in helping us decide on the proper height of the accessory structure.
I would guess about 15. It looks like about 15 feet, unless you're going to the top of the very top of the chimney. But I'm assuming the top of the roof is what we're looking at. Yeah, just kind of eyeballing it, 14 to 15 feet.
All right, do y'all want to, want to hear from the neighbor? Yeah.
We can wrap up anything with the.
Yeah, does anybody have any more questions for the applicant?
How far is the construction at this point? Is
I mean,
Y está tiene como un
They flatten the roof?
como un 8%.
From 0 to 10, it's about an 8 almost done. Basically, the frame is done. They just need to finish up with the second floor.
it past the photos that we've seen, or are the photos we've seen pretty much where it is? Construction.
No, todavía me faltan más poner.
Pretty far along.
No, ya no.
I hope he didn't go further.
The way the photo is, that's how
Okay.
we stopped there.
Okay.
I got one more question. Are you going to put some sort of driveway to the back to get to it if you're storing construction materials?
He's not.
Okay. Just carry stuff to it. Okay. All right, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, I got Mr. Reed. If you can give your name and address for the record, please.
Grant Reed in 1639 Colonial Road.
Okay, and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
I'll ask you, where's your house? Is it just the house south of it?
It's directly next to it. It's on the other side of his driveway. You can kind
Gotcha.
of see my driveway in that picture.
Gotcha, okay. All right, go ahead, talk to us.
Basically, I'm just here to support him, and he's always kept his stuff nice and clean. And I personally do not have a problem with his structure, and I know he needs to be able to store a lot of stuff. But I'm basically just here to support him, and he's always kept up with his stuff, and he's investing in our Colonial Acres community. So if y'all could approve it, that'd be great.
Okay,
Can I ask another question?
go for it.
Tell me again, which house is yours? Is it that red brick one that you can see there?
No, ma'am, it's on the other side.
It's towards this.
Yeah, to the left.
You can barely see the drive.
But it's right next to it on the other side?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Reed?
I see currently that it's, in its current state, it's in CMU block in wood. What is going to be the final, what was the intention for the final finish for the addition?
Just cement
Ms. Ramirez, could you repeat that in the microphone, please? Thank you.
The house is gonna be cemented.
You say cement? Like in its current condition, or like a stucco finish on it, or I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
He's gonna cement it and then just paint it. ¿Qué color? He was gonna do white paint over.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Is it a stucco and then paint over it, or just paint over the blocks?
No.
So I'm trying to figure.
Siding.
¿Le vas a poner siding y luego lo vas a pintar?
Sí.
He's gonna put siding, then paint it white.
Like the cement board siding?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha now. Okay.
Any other
Okay,
questions?
I
Yeah,
have
go
one
ahead.
more
Yeah, go
question.
for it.
The roof in that site plan, it looked like it might be standing seam metal. Am I not looking at that right?
In the site plan.
Or is it shingle roof?
Pictures or the site plan?
Based on the pictures is what I'm looking at. I mean, I'm looking at the elevations.
Okay, the
Yeah. To me, that looks like standing seam metal on the roof.
I'm sorry.
What material is the roof going to be?
¿Qué tipo de material va a ser el?
Techo normal con los que tienen la casa de
shingle.
de
It's just gonna be regular shingles.
Regular shingles, okay.
I might want to have that as a,
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Is there anybody here in opposition to this case on Colonial? All right. Okay, so y'all can be seated. If we could get a motion to approve BOA 23-048 as conditioned by staff.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Now we're in discussion. Right now we have a few conditions. They gotta have the site plan, can't be over 20 feet, compatible with the building. Looks like they've done those things. Are there any other conditions you want to add?
well, compatible with the building. What is that material on the
It's like
siding?
painted brick, at least one part of it.
Brick.
Any brick and just shingle roof.
So, and he's going to use cement siding. I don't see that as a big problem, but,
We could say cement siding.
yeah, but I do think the roof should be a shingle roof to
Right.
go with the neighborhood. So if we want to add that as specific conditions.
So what we probably don't want is them just to paint the cinder block.
Correct.
Correct.
Right. So it could be siding or brick faced, I guess. Or, yeah.
Brick, even if it's brick at the base and even if it's brick on the CMU block and siding. That's the frame construction.
Yeah.
That's because there's a house, a couple of houses down actually has that. With the brick at the bottom.
So how about the accessory structure shall have a shingle roof, and the final exterior shall be brick or siding, not painted cinder block.
Well, or were we going to say brick at the bottom and siding at the second?
I mean,
Or are you
You don't
strong
want to
about
get
that?
into the
If you're trying to be
design.
comparable to the community, I mean, I don't have a full view of the context of the neighborhood, but every house that I see shown on the image is brick. And it has it's either all brick or brick at the base and has siding kind of on the roof.
A lot of those, I mean, I've lived there, they have additions, those are siding in
Oh,
the back.
siding.
Instead, sometimes they haven't bricked.
Okay.
Or started brick and they put in a garage and that's siding. So
I think at the basis, you would say a minimum of the siding then, was
Cement siding, yeah.
And, yeah.
So siding or brick.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let's, if we can, let's discuss the height of the building.
Yeah.
The code is there for a reason that the accessory should not be taller than the primary structure on the property. And I'm trying to get my mind around a reason why we should allow this exception. What's special about this property to allow it to step outside of the rules that apply to everybody else, other than the fact that, he started the construction without getting the proper permits and just, are we rewarding him for doing that? So is there a reason why we should allow this, allow this incident to step outside of the rules?
No. Man, it's a great point. And honestly, it's just because you see a project that's this far on the way and you try to be reasonable with allowances, and that's why I ask about the need for the second story structure and what level of construction was it at this point? Because you can either make the case that it needs to be reduced to not exceed that, and you might not have a full second floor storage. It might just be like a typical attic in a house where sometimes you can't fully stand up, but you can still, almost like a mezzanine type storage. So, I would definitely be open to that as well. Once again, that's just kind of the trying to understand how much construction has already been done into it, but that would be reasonable to reduce that height to be not a full second story.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that. I think the way I was kind of justifying it in my own mind is in that neighborhood, and I want to say, Mr. Ragsdale, that the maximum height is 45 feet in R6. Is that right? And so the way I'm thinking about it in my own mind is anybody on that street, any of those homes, if they wanted to go to a second story, they could. And of course, there wouldn't be anything to keep them from doing it. And in a lot of cases, when these neighborhoods start really coming back to life and growing again, you will have people, even if they don't add right up to the second story, they'll add an addition on the back that has a second story. And so that was how I was thinking of it, as being reasonable. And the building is so much smaller than the principal building. So I was putting those two things together. And that's why I was willing to overlook the 2 stories.
So they could add a second story onto the primary building, right?
All right. I believe, isn't that right?
But not necessarily the accessory.
Where do you measure a building's height to?
That's what I was going to ask. Was it to the chimney top or the?
No, that's an interesting question.
Just add some
because,
chimney.
Actually, the primary structure, you measure, if you have a gable or a hip roof, you measure it to the midpoint of the highest point of the roof. We have, it's not a discrepancy, but there's, the accessory section actually says that you measure to the highest point of the accessory structure. So, you could get into the point where you'd say, well, where we're measuring the principal structure is actually half of the roof, and the accessory is actually the top. So you're already kind of getting double hit there. So, but I think, we always look at the accessory structure. We look at the top of the primary structure as what we're trying to hit.
Yeah.
Another reason why I think this one, for some reason, just me personally, it didn't look as bad was because of the the large setback from the primary structure. Like it's not backed right up to the primary structure. It's like, what would we say, 50 feet from the primary structure. So that kind of gave it a little relief. But I definitely understand, you know, we don't want to set a precedent of don't get permitted, ask for forgiveness, and you still get kind of what you want. So, I don't know. I think those conditions we put would be the minimum of what we need to do in order if we did move forward with keeping the structure as is.
I think where I hear what you're saying. I'm stuck too. Like, nothing made it need to be that tall. They got plenty of yard, all sorts of stuff, but then I also don't think it's that injurious. You know, but I don't know that there's anything special about that yard that makes it different than anybody else. It'd be one thing if everything else in the neighborhood was 2 stories, and we have the one-story house, and we have to have the smaller thing in the back. We don't really have that. I just don't. But then I'm stuck with it. Just I don't think it's that bad where it's sitting, you know, so far, like you're saying, so far back from the house and stuff, and it's balancing those 2 things and trying to figure out some way to make it work if we can.
I mean, in retrospect, you almost would have just made one long, one-story structure. Not even, but.
Yeah, I guess I'm okay either way, but I am a little troubled by us setting a precedent that, or sending the message that, well, you know, just go start building what you want. And if you start it, then they'll grant you the variance that you need. I think that's the wrong message that we want to get out there. This one, you know, if we take the second floor off or make it lower, make it like an attic as opposed to a whole floor like you suggested, there are ways to make it work, or even just make the first floor wider. I mean, there's ways to get there. There's ways to get the extra space that they need without violating the code. And it just sounds like we're going to allow them to violate the code because he started it without a permit. And it seems like we're kind of rewarding that, and that's the wrong message, you know, to send out there, I think.
I'm with Mr. Bruce on, I'm having a hard time identifying the hardship. We try to make sure we set the rules that, you know, financial or something of that nature is not a definition of hardship. And I guess I'm just on the, I see that there's not a drive, so we don't have the illusion as we have in the, well, there could be, you know, that could come later, which probably is, which hence you have a drive, a garage door. I can't see that just sitting there for a long period of time with just a garage door and no drive. But I can't speak to that. But I'm just having a hard time with the hardship and the fact that there is an option to, I don't know how difficult it would be because I'm not in construction, but to make it compatible with the height of the main dwelling.
What about meeting in the middle? Because as Mr. Rags already told us, we have 2 different heights we're dealing with. And they would need a variance still on height, but we say it can't be higher than the peak of the front roof,
I can be in agreement.
as opposed to the midpoint of the front roof. And that would give, I don't know, 2 or 3 more feet, you know, than what code would allow.
Yeah, that's kind of what I.
But they would have to, they would have to lower, and there wouldn't be quite the same room to stand up there. You know, just be like those, you know, those attics aren't very big in those houses. You kind of have to, but I'm sure stored a lot of stuff in my attic that was that big.
Right.
You know. And then the other option is make it wider, add something onto the side, you know. And as far as the building permit, one of the reasons I asked the question is in construction, but they didn't have to do any electrical. And some people think, people think they can build anything when they're not having to pull electrical permits. Sometimes that just is people just don't realize, oh, I just can't build a shed in my backyard, when theoretically you're not supposed to. If you have a roof, you're supposed to get a permit, but I don't know. That's not well known. Had there been electrical, I would have been like, no.
Yeah.
Or plumbing or something like that.
Okay.
Manager, want to say something?
I have one more idea about this.
Okay.
He has the neighbor with him on, I don't know, left side. I don't know what for sure what direction that is. I'm not looking at the map, but for me, if I had a letter or a neighbor down here for that brick house on the other side and the one behind him, that would make a lot of difference to me, because this is another thing that influences me. It's one of those cases that we deal with that really only affects the people that are directly next door. It really doesn't affect anybody else. And so that's the reason why I'm tending to be more flexible. But I understand the precedent idea. I do get it, believe me. But I was just wondering if he could get that, would that change anybody's idea about what we would do?
It wouldn't, I don't think it'll change mine, because while I understand that the neighbors are the ones primarily viewing it, if I'm a neighbor across the street, I will feel like my say is just as important, just because, we never know the origin of these rules in the first place. Like what caused them to create a rule that said this in the first place. So I don't necessarily think it's just the neighbors' agreement on it that would make it right, because there's other people who might say, how about the house that's butting up to the back of it, or the house across the street? They might, for some reason, had objections to it. I do think there is a compromise somewhere that says, it might take some modification of the structure, as we mentioned, but if that's the compromise that everybody feels comfortable with a slight reduction in the height to match the height of the existing primary structure, that's not that challenging to do.
Yeah, and I think that, if we got approvals or consents from the neighbors, that would be helpful. But I still think about, this way I think about all these cases, the people that own those properties today are probably different from the people that are going to own them 25 years from now. Yeah. And so we got to, so I try to think about, the long-term impact of this, not only on the people that are there today, but on the next generation of people that are going to be on those properties. It would help. That's not to say it wouldn't help. It would help. But I'm still going to think about long-term effects on future owners.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in an unusual position for me, right?
Mary. You really are. I'm thinking the same thing.
Really. I'm just wondering if, I'm looking at this this way, that a lot of times people will come in here and they'll be all up in arms about something like this is built without a permit and it's visible from their house and so on and so forth. And, when you look at the image of it and the construction and the siding and everything, it's just obviously it's shoddy, and takes away from the neighborhood. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we have this kind of review, because it gives us an opportunity to say, well, okay, you're in that kind of Mother May I type situation. And so we have an opportunity to make whatever it is you were going to build better than it would have been if it had just been following the rules. So I'm just putting that out there in case it influences anybody's opinion on this.
So what about the suggestion that was made that we just, allow them to build it, but lower the height a little bit to maybe the highest point of the primary structure? So that's a compromise. I just, that way it's not sending the message that you can go build whatever you want. And if you start building it, then they'll approve it because they will have to make some modification. But at the same time, we're kind of working with them and trying to help find a way to get it done.
I'm open for that because it keeps it within some level of compliance with what the code, what the ambiguity of the code states. So that would be a fair compromise that keeps the project going, and the modifications might be minor. And one question I would like to probably know once we open it back up, if we open it back up, is he self-performing this work? Or does, because that would also help us understand kind of the cost implication of it. But I would be fine with that. As a condition.
And if he decided to, if we're offering that condition and he said, well, I'm just going to go back to what I can do under code and without a variance, he would still have to use materials and so on to match the principal building, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so I would offer that we add that condition, that the height, the height of the structure at the top of the roof shall not be any higher than the height of the primary residence at the top of the roof. Okay, so we'll add that, and then the one we had about the compatibility of the shingles and stuff. Any other comments before we vote? All right, Mr. Ragsdale, if you'll give us a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bostic? Mr. Bruce?
That we discussed.
Yes. And Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Jones?
Find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rayner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Ragsdale, if you call on our next case for us.
Item number 13, BOA 23-050, 4915 Marion Avenue.
The applicant present? Is the applicant present on the Marion case? Okay. And then is there any opposition? No. Okay. Mr. Thomas, if you'll give us a staff report, please.
Good afternoon again. Seth Thomas, the Memphis and Shelby County Office of Planning and Development. So this case is BOA 2350. It's at 4915 Marion Avenue, and it's a variance from subsection 4.6.7C to allow a front yard fence higher than 4 feet in the residential single-family 10 district. Here's an aerial of the map, pretty close to the intersection of Ivy Road and Marion Avenue. This is the zoning map, pretty much wholly surrounded by single-family residential uses on all sides. Here's the land use map that sort of indicates the same thing. And here are the site photos of the fence. This is a view of the subject property from Marion Avenue facing southeast. This is a view facing southwest. And then this is a view of the subject property from directly across the street. This is the site plan that was sort of provided through courtesy citation to the Memphis and Shelby County Office of Construction Code Enforcement, as the fence was constructed without a permit, and after the property owner was cited, they reached out to code enforcement and filed for this fence variance. Staff feels that there really isn't a practical difficulty presented by the applicant, and so we are recommending rejection. However, we are, if approved, we're recommending two conditions: that the front yard fence should be dropped down to the height of the brick pillar on the eastern side of the driveway, which you can see in this photo. That pretty much concludes my presentation. I'm open for any questions. Thanks.
How tall is the brick pillar?
I think it's measured on the site plan.
Count the bricks.
I thought it was measured on the site plan, but I'm pretty sure it's like 5 feet and some change. Because the fence itself as it sits is about 6 feet. So,
okay.
I wish I could zoom in on it.
Looks like about 5.
4 foot, the folks say the brick wall's 4 feet. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for staff?
Does he need a variance if he goes down to 4 feet?
He would not need variance if he goes down 4 feet, no.
All right, Mr. Beard, or state if you'll give your name and address for the record.
James Beard, 4915 Marion Avenue.
Okay, and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
First of all, I apologize. Wasn't aware that in 2019 it was changed so that you had to get a permit for a fence. Previous to that, I'd done a lot of construction and had looked at the code and updated myself as of 2010, but failed to look before doing the fence to find out I needed a permit. Once I was cited, I then applied for that permit, and code enforcement was working to find a workaround to approve it after inspecting it. And when they didn't, then I filed for the variance. I'd already talked to all my neighbors about it. Office of Planning and Development told me that their main problem when talking to Seth on the phone was consistency of architectural context. And I believe that looking at pictures, starting at the next door to my house, I don't know if he's can bring that picture up or not, but basically said, my next door neighbors have a 4-foot picket fence around their flat yard, just down the street from me at 847 South Mendenhall. Yes, it's their side and backyard, I realize, but it's a 6 to 8 foot fence, 10 foot from the street. And it actually blocks your view as Mendenhall turns to Marion, it actually blocks your view of the turn. See if you can come up with that too ahead of me.
Sorry, I'm trying to pull up your
next door would be probably on the second page, I think.
Would you like me to go on Google Maps for the list you gave me, or do you want to look at the? Okay.
Next door, the one next door, Peg, should be.
Well, yeah, I think here we might be able to see it from one of the photos I took here. So I think the fence that he's referring to.
It's got a 4-foot picket, and then you can see over the back of that is an 8-foot fence that I paid half of that goes between my property and his. Of course, it's off the street, but there it is, same cedar material. If you can find 847, that's the one where it's actually blocking it. If you continue on around the street to Carnes, down Mendenhall to Carnes, there are two, that shows my neighbor before they built the 4-foot section, so the next door picture I have would have been better. Can you?
Yeah, 4976.
I don't know if you can get to those portal pictures. If you can, I guess I can just continue. That goes on to, that's 4978 Carnes. It shows the street. Yeah, it's just on the side, but it's 6 foot aging. It comes out 10 foot to the street. And if you're walking, down that street, you can't see what's behind that fence, and it does, neighbors are a bit intimidated, you know, walking their dogs, coming down through there in the next fence. You can't see what might be on the other side of that fence as you're walking down the street.
Is that because of the drop off on the, is that because of the drop off of the topography drops off so significantly? Oh, is that because of the topography drops off so much from?
Well, those is just because it's flat, and if you're walking along, that fence is a good 6 foot tall, plus then the overgrowth on it. You can't see what's on the other side of that fence as you're walking down the street. The next fence actually angles down, but it still blocks that view. And it also has fences in the front yard area. As you continue down Carnes, there are two, right there, you see two fences coming out, one even closer than 10 foot to the street, the other one 10 foot from the street. They're blocked in fences. You go on around that corner the other way and take a left. There's a fence right there that comes out. Maybe it was built after that was shown, but there's it was on the left back there at 813 Moss, or 813 Moss, excuse me. Back inside yard fence comes out 10 foot to the street. It's an 8 foot fence, and there's sometimes an aggressive dog in there that'll hit the fence really hard, which if you're walking along, you don't know, you can't see. Dog comes out, boom. People have lost the lead of their dog, been startled. The neighbors dislike that fence more than they dislike mine. On neighbor feedback about the architectural context and talking to my neighbors, of course I talked to my neighbors before I built the fence. I'm not sure how many letters were sent in to staff.
Yeah, so we received one letter by the time that the staff report was posted, and since then we've received 4 letters of support and a petition that was signed by some of the neighbors. You can find that at the back. It should be paper clipped to the back of the staff report. And earlier this morning we did receive 1 letter of opposition. So I think in total, I believe the petition had, 10 signatures. So in total, we've got about 15 people in support and 1 person that submitted something in opposition.
I'm not sure that opposition. And many of these neighbors would have liked to have been here, couldn't get off work. Some of them didn't know that they were not permitted to build a fence over foot in their front yard, and weren't really happy to find that out for what it's worth. But they all felt that my fence posed no problem, and if anything added to the neighborhood. You can tell there it's a quality fence built with cedar. It's built by a carpenter, and it's probably the straightest fence in Memphis. There's no weaving or curving. That fence is true straight. And moving on to my hardship, you can look at that. We'll go ahead and do this drawing here. If you saw from that picture, the slope of the front yard is 30-degree slope. My other neighbors adjacent have about a 20-degree slope. Mine's at 30. If I just went 4 feet where that fence is, back 10 feet off the street, it would only be an average of a half foot or 6 inches, basically going from 4 to 8 inches above the ground level. With a 6 foot, it's only 2.5 feet above the top of my yard. If I came in and put a fence on the top of my yard, 4 foot tall, it would be taller than the 6 foot fence where it's at. And so from my investigation as to why the code says 4 foot, I know they want to be uniform and consistent, but why not 3 foot, 5 foot? The reason for 4 foot, according to emergency management, I'm a certified civilian emergency response team member. According to what TEMA told us, and then what I've heard from older MPD officers, they went with that because they had a problem with motorcycle gangs and other people building tall fences in front of their house, obscuring the view of the front door for law enforcement so they couldn't see comings and goings. And emergency management, who have the big earthquake across, you need to be able to see that front door, see the signs and markings. Is it inhabited? Is it inhabitable? Etc. on that front door. My fence in no way blocks my front door. In fact, you have a better view of my front door than if I put the fence up on top of the yard at 4 foot. I'm having to move my 93-year-old mother-in-law with Alzheimer's and her dog into my house to live in the front part of the house. She might wander outside with the dog. The dog's a 140-pound bull mastiff. If you search the internet, you'll find that the universal recommendation for a containment fence for that dog is a minimum of 5 feet. Because I can build on top of a retaining wall, the right side of that is approximately 5 feet or more because of the retaining wall. The code allows me to go 4 feet above the retaining wall. I do have a section on the left up at the top where it's only 4 feet, and as I've shown in the drawings, that is only 2.5, that's 2.5 feet taller than the fence in the front. I believe that a strict interpretation of the code will allow me to come 4 feet above the top of the yard all the way around, and I've actually dropped below that.
Can I ask you some questions?
The staff report said that there was no hardship or practical reason, but if I come down under required findings after the colon, it says the topography of this lot does allow for a taller fence, front yard fence. This imparts the owner of the following hardship. It seems that it contradicts, even in the report, that there's no hardship, but yet there is a hardship. There's no way I can contain the dog dropping that fence height. What I would be forced to do.
Okay, hold on. We've gone through your 10 minutes. Can I ask you some questions?
I'm sorry?
We've gone through your 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Okay, couple things. One, what is the width of the spaces in your fence?
2 inch.
2 inch,
2
okay.
inches, done with a 2x4.
Okay.
2 inch spacing.
And then staff, with that big of a gap, is that considered like non-site proof? Is that big enough to make it, or is there a definition of what, site proof fence, is there a non-site proof fence? Because I mean, we all can see through the fence.
So at least for my understanding, when we talk about site-proof fencing, a lot of the times for that height, we're referring to like wrought iron,
Sure.
where you've got a slightly larger gap. But I do think that this sort of exists in that, I guess, quasi-site-proof world where it's not the traditional, like you would see in a rear yard, where it's
Right.
non-see-through planks. But really, the site-proofing, at least, and of course, the people with the Unified Development Code in front of them, I'm sure can maybe provide better understanding. But for large lots that have front yard fences, we allow them generally through the house being further set back from the street, and then also having wrought iron, which is significantly more site-proof than a.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Are there other questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's
I looked at putting wrought
better.
iron up there, but after pandemic times, fence companies told me that just the material would be $30,000 plus labor to install it. So
Wow.
it became a bit cost prohibitive to use industrial iron.
That sounds
Yeah.
like somebody didn't want to build a fence. That's a lot. Mary?
Okay, yeah, my question, I don't know if this goes it's partially to the applicant and maybe partially to the staff. For the applicant, how many lots in that area have that same kind of slope that you have?
There are 1, 2, 3 yards to the east, but their slope is not as much. I'm the in yard of the slope off, and it slopes toward me. Their slope is, as I measure my next door neighbor, it was at 20 degrees, whereas mine is 30.
So what you're saying is you're unusual in that
Yes.
way on the street.
I'm 100%.
And so here's my question for the staff. Why wouldn't that be considered as an unusual condition, physical condition of the property that would possibly make it eligible for a variance? Not a use variance, but a
In
variance
the
like this.
determination, at least that I made, it's sort of the situation where Because, so he is correct in that his slope is the highest and it kind of goes down as you go further down Marion. But really from a contextual infill standpoint, right, is sort of the way I was looking at it in terms of there really aren't any other front yard fences along Marion on that block on either side. And so the fact that the fence was built without a permit and all of those things sort of, I was going to make the recommendation of rejection and leave it up to y'all whether you felt that it was an appropriate thing to, you know, approve or not approve, given that the context of the neighborhood doesn't necessarily fit that front yard fence existing, is sort of the way I went about looking at it.
So you're saying you don't think there should be a fence at all?
I don't think there should be a front yard fence that's 6 feet above what it would be generally standard, on top of the fact that, you know, it was built without a permit. So we would have been able to catch this on the front end and work with it, but now, of course, it's a retroactive variance, and so it really puts us in a sort of we're sort of handcuffed in many respects.
Is there a max setback that a fence can be? Like yours is how far from the street currently? No problem. I was asking, how far is your fence from the street currently?
How far is my
Fence from the street, yes.
And Mr. Beard, if you could, Mr. Beard, I just want to make sure I get you on the microphone also. I know that you're trying to hear that.
It's 10 feet from the street.
Okay, and this might be for the staff. Is there a maximum distance that a fence can be from the street? Meaning, even a max, like if he wanted that fence, to his point, if that fence came all the way back to the top of that hill, could he legally do it? And if he can legally do that with a 4-foot fence, to his point, that will leave you with a fence that is from the street level approximately
A foot and a half.
higher than, visibly it would be higher walking down the street to see a fence, even at 4 foot, if it was set back further on the property due to his slope of the front yard. So I guess what I'm asking is, for the benefit of a fence and the height where his house sits in relationship to where the street sits, does it negate a taller fence in that matter just because of the nature of his yard? Because how it comes out and then it looks like it drops off significantly to the sidewalk. So with a 4-foot fence, will he in essence be looking out his window over the fence? I mean, completely? It's kind of hard to
I was going to say, I guess there's probably a couple questions in there. So, I guess to answer the one about the maximum, so we consider a front yard fence anything that extends past the front facade of the house. And then there's a certain amount of distance that it has to be away from the right of way. But technically speaking, a front yard fence is anything that extends past the front of the house up to the point where it can legally be as close to the street as the UDC dictates. Okay. Now, the question of, is it technically, if you were to move a 4-foot fence on top of the slope, I suppose it would, in essence, as Mr. Beard's chart indicates, would be taller than the 6-foot fence that sits at the bottom of the slope currently. Yeah. I guess would be, yes, I suppose the answer is.
Does that drawing show that 6-foot fence is only 2.5 feet above the top of the yard? And I have pictures where I measured that. I pulled a string from the front of the fence of the yard, leveled it, and put a yardstick on it, and I got 28 at the high spot and 32 at the low spot. So with an average of 30 inches or 2.5 feet above.
Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant before we discuss? And let me make sure there's no one here in opposition. Okay, thank you, sir. If we could get a motion to approve BOA 2023-50 as conditioned by staff?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I think, to me, he made the point of the slope. I do adhere to the difficulty of the property with that, him having the largest slope and the drop down. He did keep in mind or build on the lower end to try to keep that fence comparable to what was going on in the neighborhood. But he could have gone to the highest and built at 4 feet, which would have made it much higher visibly to defeat the purpose of, I don't know, the protection of MPD looking in. So, unlike other cases, I'm probably more inclined, because he does have a physical hardship on that property, to go ahead and even though he did it without a permit, to permit this property, so long as going forward that fence or any fence going forward does not exceed that height.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have somewhat a different role than staff does here. You know, Mr. Thomas, we're asking questions where you put the fence, like, this is the fence. This is the fence Mr. Thomas had to deal with. And so he gave his, this is what I think we got to do with this fence.
Right.
Now, I think we have two competing interests. Is you have one, you want a fence to be short enough you can see over it. You want to see the house. Here we have that. As far as if you're in your car, you're back far enough from this fence, you see the whole house because the house is above it. If you're right next to it, it feels more like a 6-foot fence. You know, if you're walking down the street,
Right.
but you know, you can see through the fence,
Right.
you know, those 2-inch gaps. So I think that kind of alleviates that. But I do think that the fact that the house is so high, you're still getting a lot of visibility of this property and don't feel like, oh my goodness, there's this wall and what's behind it. I think that in this case, I don't find it to be injurious. And I think you could use that slope as the reason why it's not, and it is a little more unique than other things. So I think that the guy walking by, and especially with having as many neighbors like, hey, this looks great, that I would vote in favor of this, and I wouldn't have him drop the height at this point.
Right. I agree.
Any comments?
Yeah, I agree. The slope is, the significant slope is to me, is an unusual characteristic that justifies the variance.
Yeah. Okay. No other comments, I assume you're ready to vote. Okay, Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call, please?
Sir. Mr. Campbell?
Oh, you say Campbell? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. My hearing went out for us, please.
Mr. Baker? Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Ms. Bostic?
Yes.
And Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
And Chair Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming down. Mr. Ragsdale, we call our next case, please.
Item number 16, DOA 23-53, 1509 Russwood Road.
All right, is the applicant present? See the applicant. Is there any opposition? Oh, they're all coming forward, so we'll figure that out. Mr. Davis, will you give us a staff report, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Brett Davis with Planning and Development. This is case, again, BOA 23-53 regarding 1509 Russwood Road. There are several variances being requested today, all retroactive, relating to vehicular access, parking, and associated accessory structures. Just some background information, general information. The owner and applicant is Marlon Femont, represented today by Mr. Whitehead. Some of these variances were explicitly requested by the applicant, as included in the application form and the staff report. Others were implicit in the work that's already been done on the site. So we've just identified all of the code violations that we could and laid them out in front of you here. So just to go over them, we've got a detached rear garage, which was built without a permit, that may be 5 feet within the side property line. We weren't positive, it's very close, but certainly exceeds the height of the house. We've got a detached carport in the front yard, so no accessory structures allowed in the front yard. That was also erected without a permit. Regarding both of those accessory structures, we have a standard that the cumulative area of accessory structures not exceed 75% of the area of the principal structure, which was violated in this instance. We've got 2 front yard parking pads in the front yard, so no front yard parking pads should be allowed here. 2 curb cuts Generally, only one curb cut is allowed unless associated with a circular driveway. And we've also got 2 vehicular gates in front of each curb cut that do not provide any queuing space. So if those gates were closed and a car were to drive up, they would have to wait for that gate to open in the right-of-way, which is not allowed, unless explicitly approved by the city engineer. The area is just over 1/5 of an acre, and the zoning is residential single-family 6. This property is located in Berclair. Here is the subdivision plat that created this lot in 1952, lot 201 over here. Zoning map, so everything is R6. There is undeveloped land to the east that's zoned agricultural, but generally everything is single-family residential in this area. We've got 2 Google Street View images in this presentation. The first here is from 2022, and the second is 2014. So just to look at some of the changes that have been made to the property since 2014, this original driveway was expanded. So it was originally a ribbon driveway, and it was widened, pavement was added, and this carport was erected. This other driveway was also expanded into another parking pad in front of the house, as you can see here. So just to give a little background information on that, there was a parking pad here, but in our view, when it was repaved, they lost any possible legal nonconforming status. And the same thing goes with having the 2 curb cuts, that when this driveway was repaved, as you see here, it also lost any legal nonconforming status to have the second driveway. We also see that this fence was installed. That's okay, but the issue is the gates that you see here in this photo in front of you, right along the property line. Some other changes we see in this photo submitted by the applicant, you can see that rear yard garage. So that is a little higher than the absolute height of the house, I believe, and may be within 5 feet of the property line on the far side of this photo. Here's the site plan that sort of shows all of that. This original garage was removed. Here is the new rear garage. Of course, we've got these 2 parking pads and this carport here. This technically isn't a carport right now since there's a carport there, but if the carport were removed, it would become a parking pad. And this concrete in front of the house is considered a parking pad as well. So in conclusion, the applicant has requested several retroactive variances related to vehicular access, parking, and associated accessory structures. Staff does not find that there's any unusual physical characteristic of this property that presents an undue hardship or practical difficulty related to following the relevant standards. And for that reason, we are recommending rejection. And just for your edification, we are pointing out that you are authorized to approve certain parts of the request and not others. But again, we are just recommending rejection. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Are there any questions? All right, we'll move on to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh White at Birch Porter Johnson, 130 North Court. I'm here representing the homeowner, Marlon Fiamont, and her husband, Jose Hernandez. First of all, the good news, Mr. Davis correctly articulated the various sundry variances that are involved. A few of them are not necessarily requested variances, but would legitimize otherwise non-conforming situations. But first and foremost, we did measure the setback of the new garage in the rear yard. It does meet the setbacks. The closest it lies to the nearby property line is 5 feet 1 inch. So we can remove that as a requested variance. The proposed layout of that rear yard garage will be that about 40% will be open as an open carport patio, and only 60% will be enclosed. We believe that under the definition of square feet under the UDC, that will lower our square footage to below the 75% as it relates to the main house, thereby removing that variance. The left driveway, the southern driveway, Mr. Davis correctly pointed out, was originally a ribbon concrete driveway that terminated at the old garage. At some point before 1981, when the 1981 aerial was taken, that terminated into a new den. So the garage was moved to the northwest corner of the property. A new driveway was installed. That driveway met the zoning ordinance at the time. We believe that the transition from a ribbon driveway to a regular driveway may and could be interpreted as an expansion of a nonconformity. We believe, though, that it could also be interpreted as ordinary maintenance of the driveway. But let's talk about the variances that we know we need. The height of the garage is indeed taller than the principal house. The principal house, to the tip of the peak of the roof, is 15 feet. We exceed that by 16 inches. Now, as we discussed on the previous case, the measurement is at the midpoint. So midpoint to midpoint, midpoint of main house to new garage is an 8-inch difference. There is no second floor, and you cannot see it from the street, at least from the street in front of the house. As Mr. Davis's images reflected, you can see it, however, from an angle behind the house. And from that angle, it's really not too much of a discernible difference insofar as the height. Gate location, the UDC does require a 20-foot setback for gates. I believe that has heretofore been interpreted to mean that gates that access apartment buildings and subdivisions that have a key code are 20 feet back. I'm not familiar with that requirement ever being applied to a single-family home. But be it as it may, we are right at the fence line, right at the property line behind the sidewalk. And finally, the parking pad in the front. This was an improvement recently made. It's on the right. We, unfortunately, or for better or for worse, this is a commonplace situation in the neighborhood. My client did not know he needed a permit for such improvement, nor was he aware that it violated the zoning ordinance. I believe in pages 26 of 33 of your staff report, you'll see some of my images of surrounding houses. I would say that probably at least 50% of the nearby houses also have front yard parking pads, which I think relates to what could be a practical difficulty in that many of these lots are relatively narrow with one-story houses, relatively large one-story houses on these narrow lots. Mr. Chairman, I'm available for any questions, but I'd like to reserve the balance of my time to maybe respond to our opposition.
All right, so we're reserving 5 minutes. They give us 7 minutes, correct? Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant?
I have a question, and I don't know if this goes to Mr. Whitehead or the staff. I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure. Russwood, is that a minor street?
Yes.
Not a collector?
No.
Great, thank you.
Other questions at this time?
I have a question regarding the covering that we see in this photograph. Did that come before or after the garage addition in the back?
That came before, and I wanted to articulate a few concessions during my rebuttal, but one of the concessions is we are definitely willing to remove the front yard carport.
Okay, because that was kind of the most that I figured was automatic had to go, but that one, okay, you cleared that up then, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Whitehead, your response to the fence, that it's not the automatic, I wasn't clear on, or I'm not sure if we got a response on that.
So the UDC says if you have, I think it says 0 to 40 units, your gate needs to, I guess the 0 comes into play for non-residential uses. If you have 0 to 40 residential units, the gate must be 20 feet behind the back of sidewalk, behind the property line. And I believe the intent of that was really for larger buildings that have a lot of tenants and a lot of homeowners in the case of condominiums, where you need to get that constant traffic off the public right-of-way as they access the gate or they access their key fob. With the amount of traffic related to a single-family house, I don't think, and I'm not sure if that section of the code has ever been applied to a single-family house, because there's just such a reduction in traffic to the site.
Other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the opposition. If you'll give your name and address for the record.
My name is James Burton. My address is 9031 Dogwood Road, Germantown, Tennessee.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God.
Okay, go ahead, share with us. You have 10 minutes if you need it.
I own the house, I don't know where that is, but I own the house next to the house that they're planning to do this to. We originally, the letter we got from y'all said that it would encroach or be too close to my property line. That's the reason we came. My other objections is that's a lot of parking. That's a lot of
stuff,
activity, a lot of stuff. So I own the house at 1482 Rustwood. It is a rental house. It was the house I was raised in, but I have real good renters, and I just think it's an awful lot of stuff. What else? I mean, since it's not going to encroach on my property, there's probably nothing else I could say about it. But
yeah,
there you go.
Okay. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
In this image, nobody's parking there. Are there ever a lot of cars on the lot?
Beg pardon?
There's no cars parked in these driveways. But is that the case normally, or is this unusual? Is there normally a lot of people parking there, or do you know that?
In the house next door to
The one that's in this image right here, the subject property.
In the afternoon, there's a lot of cars there. I don't know when that picture was taken. I really don't know what house that is. I guess I didn't know they put up a gate there, and I was just over there last week. But anyway, yeah,
it looks like you got. Hold on, I need to swear you in before you speak, but I'm happy to do that. Your co-counsel can talk. All right, if you'll give your name and address for the record, please.
Okay. I'm Susan Burton. I'm his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I live at 9031 Dogwood, Germantown.
Okay, let me swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Burton.
This is not the house next door. I don't know. I mean, we were just over there, last week?
Yeah.
He was working over there. I know that in the past, when they built the carport, the roof came all the way over to the fence. We didn't realize that at the time that they built the carport that it was going to do that, and we didn't say anything about it because we didn't actually know what to do. It was already there. So, and there's no property. Well, I know the house that's on the other side, it's not brick, and that's a brick house over there. So I'm really confused about this picture. I don't know of any houses in that area.
What was the address y'all own again?
We own 1482. Russell.
Okay, yeah, so you wouldn't be next door because you're an even number. This is an odd number.
Got to be across the street.
Oh, okay. Well, then well, then we don't even need to be here. Okay.
Yeah, this house from y'all's house would be north of Gray Road, and it's the second house from the corner.
Okay.
at least based on what makes sense in the picture I'm looking at.
At one point, we did own that house on the corner,
Okay.
but we don't own it anymore, so that's why. So-
Yeah, if you're within 500 feet, which you would have been, you would have gotten the notice.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry to waste your time.
We're happy to see such smiling people here.
All right.
All right, thank y'all. Okay, would Mr. Whitehead like, and then no one else is here in opposition? Okay, Mr. Whitehead, would you like to rebut or offer concessions?
I'm not going to rebut, no.
Yeah.
And again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the board for your time in this late hour in the afternoon. I would like to close with, I believe, both of the provisions of the zoning ordinance that are really the fundamental heart of this request. Height of accessory structure and front yard parking pads are really aesthetic in nature. It's not necessarily life safety issues, which some of the zoning ordinance regulations can be categorized as. And I believe the homeowners here have made these improvements as aesthetically pleasing as possible, notwithstanding the required variances. And to that end, we would like to offer some concessions to increase the aesthetics of the situation. Number one, that the accessory structure, we have a stop work order on it, so if you can see in this image, it's just framed with a roof. And the zoning ordinance requires this anyway, but our house is about 80% brick. We would like to have the same proportion of the accessory structure be 80% brick, number one. Number two, as I mentioned before, removing the carport. And number three, adding and submitting a landscape plan to reflect the addition of shrubs adjacent to the parking pad. We could also offer a fourth concession that would remove at least one of the variances, and that is converting these two parking pads into a circular driveway. Our only issue with that is that we would lose the large tree in the front yard. Ms. Femont and Mr. Hernandez have spent about $100,000 on this house, which kind of demonstrates their commitment to the neighborhood, and perhaps the opposition who've already left, their inability to identify this house. And I think Mr. Davis's Google screenshots reflect the dramatic difference between then and now. And even though the now represents variances and the then perhaps not, I think we can all admit that our homeowners here have made substantial needed improvements to the house and to the neighborhood. And on one final note, Mr. Chairman, which I think brings us here and helps explain why Mr. Hernandez made the improvements that he did. Both of these articles that I'd like to offer into evidence were from the past week, and they're really a sad tale about my hometown. The first being a neighbor of our applicants being broken into, which I think is propelling many homeowners like ours here to build fences around their property. That's from WREG. And then I have a WMC TV article that we may have seen that 6,000 vehicles have been stolen in calendar year 2023. I myself have paved much of my backyard, not violating any zoning ordinance, but some people don't have as long of a lot as I do. And I think we're probably going to see an increased level of security measures being taken by our homeowners with regard to their cars. But I have these two articles, if anybody would like to peruse them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant?
I had a question. I see the two drives with the two gates. In my mind, the one on the right seems more of the primary drive. Is that a fair assumption?
I didn't hear the last word of that question.
Is that a fair assumption that the drive to the right with the gate to the right is probably more of the primary drive?
Yes, sir. That's the gate to the back and to the garage that's under construction. The one on the left dates from the 50s when the house was first constructed.
Okay. And is that one still primarily used at all for anything, or is it just kind of?
It's used on occasion, and I guess when we remove the carport, it'll be even rarer occasion.
Okay.
How many cars do they have?
Well, Mr. Hernandez, his main trade is in the construction industry, but I believe he also has a couple recreational vehicles. Three cars, and then four-wheelers.
And how many will fit in the new mansion of garage in the back?
I think we can park 2 tandem, so 4 total, not including the carport area.
And that's all in the back, correct?
In the enclosed area of the garage, yes, sir.
We had somebody a couple weeks ago that put a big awning over their entire yard because they had like 6 cars. And a boat. And it was, but at a certain point, you just like, maybe you don't have a yard big enough to have all those cars, you know? And so so they took their awning down.
I guess my biggest reason in asking that question would be, as a compromise, as an additional compromise, would they be open to abandoning the one to the left as a primary drive?
Okay, that's Ms. Femont's parking space, about to lose its cover. I think we would prefer to connect the two than
Just connect them. Okay,
remove.
gotcha.
Yeah.
That's what
I have a question. If you connect the two, would you remove the extra concrete on the one on the north side that extends in front of the house?
I think we would have to remove some of the concrete abutting the house to make it, I don't think we would get a permit from DPD if it didn't actually look like a circular driveway. So I know we would have to remove the portions that would be outside of a circular shape. And I foresee that to be the furthest to the west, the areas closest to the house.
Or would the applicant be allowed to do a circular drive by right so long as it was a circular drive?
Yes, as long as the curb cuts were at least 20 feet apart, which they are.
My concern with the circular drive, I know that was offered, but you're removing the big tree, which provides them with some greenery and shading, and it's gonna be just all concrete, or are you still offering the landscaping around the circular drive? I just hate to remove so much green space.
But if you did a circular drive, would that still allow an opportunity for greenery within the circle, theoretically?
Sure, yeah.
That tree has been there a while. I just hate to
Lose the tree.
lose a big tree.
But you could, yeah, you
can plant
put other
trees, but I
greenery
mean,
in.
that's a staple, looks like it's been there.
Mr. Whitehead, what, so before it was and I forgot the technical term, the 2 strips of concrete with ribboning?
A ribbon.
Would that be amenable to maybe going back to that? Maybe something that looked a little nicer than that. I mean, obviously, everything looks nicer, but I think you should add some vegetation there, and you don't lose your tree.
What is new concrete, but if that's the will of the board, we could accommodate.
I didn't know if you
returning
could saw cut the middle section out.
Could you cut it out and
cut
put
it out, and then
plants
you don't
in
have to
it
lay new
and
concrete in?
trees?
You'll have to because they have a whole garage in the back that they could go back to. I'm just trying to be like the Lorax and save the trees.
You can't really tell, I mean, the tree in the other picture, it's the dead of winter, so it doesn't have any leaves on it. You can see it here. I mean, I think it adds a lot.
I do too. I do too.
I personally would prefer having a tree there than a sea of white concrete.
I agree. I agree.
Right, again.
Is the biggest issue now that we're trying to navigate, is it because even with the circular drive, you will still be left with 2 vehicular gates, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're somewhat between a rock and a hard place of all the concrete in the yard. But we could say, well, you can't have that parking right there, but then you immediately get parking there as soon as they put a circle drive in.
Exactly.
And they're allowed to do that. So it's like what's the lesser of the evils?
That's what I think a circular drive would add more concrete.
Oh, yeah. And lose a tree.
And yeah, so that's why in theory, it makes sense because then you can't park along it, but people can still park along it, like you said.
Well, I'm not sure a circular drive would add more concrete because I'm assuming that you get rid of some of the concrete, some of the width of the driveway on the right. So you're giving up some concrete and you're replacing it with new concrete to connect the two sides, and it
maybe
should be roughly about the same. Yeah.
Losing the tree, though.
I have a question. That driveway, is that an allowable width of that driveway? It looks wide to me. Do we know that? It looks too wide to be a single-family residential driveway to me. Apron.
The apron is the correct width, but it flares immediately behind the apron. So I don't know if this is a great angle, but if you can see, the flaring occurs almost right behind the fence and the property line.
So are we saying that meets code or it doesn't meet code?
I believe it does, but I'll defer to Mr. Davis.
If it didn't, I would have included it as a variance.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Let me ask you this. So let's say we put a circle drive in. Typically, we're not supposed to park in drives in front of a house, right?
You can if it's a circular drive.
You can have a circular drive, okay.
But not on a parking pad.
Okay. Yeah, hence the variance for the parking pad. Okay.
I agree with Savage that getting rid of the tree, allow them to park, instead of just allowing them the variance and keeping the tree, they're gonna be parking there either way. But, they're gonna park there either way, with the tree or without the tree.
Could we make a variance that is contingent on the life of the tree? People cut down trees all the time because they're tired of raking leaves, and all of a sudden the tree's not there, and we just have all this parking in the front. I don't know how we're going to enforce it, but it'd make me feel better to know if that tree came down, we'll go ahead and do the circular drive at that point, maybe.
Well, I mean, to me, if we were going to think about a solution like that, I would just tell them they have to plant another tree after they build the circular drive.
Just hate to get rid of a mature one with a baby tree, but I hear you,
I mean, because that's enforceable and all of that. But and it may be just because it's newer and wider and all of that, but it's this big piece of pavement that's on the right side that looks almost not single family, because it's such a big piece of concrete in front of the house.
The law states that the maximum width at a single-family residence like this for a driveway at the property line, which is the back of the sidewalk, is 16 feet. So this does comply with that. But like Mr. Whitehead was saying, where it flares out, that is considered a parking pad since it doesn't lead anywhere, and that would be a violation.
Tell me that again now. Are you telling me that extra flare part is in conformance with the requirements for 16 feet, or it's wider than that?
Yeah, absolutely. The 16 feet maximum width standard for a driveway is specific to the driveway at the property line, which in this case is the back of the sidewalk. It does not apply per se to the driveway within the property itself. So at this location, it is within 16 feet. The width is under 16 feet. But because this portion of the concrete isn't taking you anywhere, we don't consider this portion to actually be part of the driveway. We consider it a parking space or a parking pad, which is not allowed in the front yard. This part is taking you to this gate, this rear gate, which takes you to the garage. So that's fine. The width of the driveway at the property line is fine, which is what that 16-foot max is specific to. So up here, we don't have a specific maximum width, but we do have a prohibition on front yard parking pads, and we would consider this to be one. Over here, if this carport were removed, which is a compromise that's been offered by Mr. Whitehead, this would then become a front yard parking pad, which would also be not allowed.
So the covering actually makes it allowable.
Well, the covering itself is not allowed, so the whole thing is a mess. It's still a parking pad, basically.
I'm with you.
He said he's going to take that down.
Right.
Yeah, but then that leaves you with what he was saying. Then that leaves you with a concrete, which takes you nowhere, which becomes a parking pad, which becomes unallowable.
A ribbon again to give it some.
I'm just saying, if I was going to make any change on this, it would be so that there's not that really wide piece of concrete that's on that's the thing that makes it, it just is very imposing visually.
So if they remove the right parking pad, they can still come in and do a circle driveway, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So you tell them, get rid of this, they're going to curve it.
You're back to,
So we're kind of back to square one.
well, back to the visual amount of concrete.
Minus the tree.
I mean, it seems like, I'm not going to say an easy solution because it's not my cars, but I'm still stuck with it. Is shutting down the one on the left, putting back a permanent fence on the left side. And if you wanted to get rid of that hardscape on the left side and put that back to greenscape, then you're back to one entry point with a rather large area that takes you to your back parking and that kind of flare out that I would be willing to allow because now you don't have two sides of parking.
So let me ask this question of staff. So I just need to catch up with everybody else. So if we had a circular driveway, then the two gates would be okay, right? But without a circular driveway, having two gates, two vehicular gates is a violation. I'm sorry?
The 2 curb cuts. We haven't even gotten to talking about the gates yet. But I'm with you there.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So while I'm with you, hey, let's make this green. They'll be like, okay, yeah, circle drive, boom. Yep. So it's kind of like.
Yeah, but if whatever they can do by right is what they can do. To me, I don't know why we would not put in conditions what we thought was a reasonable compromise because they could do something by right that would be, not follow that. That's
Say that again for me.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is, if we recommend this in a certain way with respect to the drives, and they decide that, well, I don't want to follow that recommendation, then I'm just going to do what I can by right. But then they would still be subject to this. I think I just answered my own question. They would still be subject to this Board of Adjustment case because they need it for some other variations.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be able to just go off and do something by right because they would be conditioned by this.
The variances that they still are looking for would be the 2 front yard parking pads, 2 curb cuts, and the 2 vehicular gates. So that's the only thing we were.
But a circular driveway would solve all of them, would it not?
It does.
Yes.
But and it's really circle drive or tree. That's our choice.
That's right.
Is having a tree right in the middle of where the circular drive would go.
Are we allowed to govern the necessity of a front yard tree?
Well,
I
I would say that's their choice. I mean, let them make the choice between the tree or the circular drive. That's not our choice, that's their choice.
It can be our choice, though. It can be our choice. We can absolutely say we'd rather have a tree that's mature right there. And that's what's unusual about the inability to get a circle drive is there's a mature tree we'd like to save. And I think that's absolutely within our purview to say that.
But I can also see the pros and cons of a mature tree right in front of my house. You know, I've seen a lot of cases where, I mean, I've cut down a mature tree in my old house because I didn't want the roots to mess up my house, and I didn't want a tall branch falling on my house.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I mean,
are we making the decision on something that the tree's gone next week?
Yeah.
How about the whole tree falling on your house?
Is that a true option then? Can I ask them? Are we in?
We've not gone to discussion yet. We probably should.
Just a quick question. Is a circular drive truly on the table as an option that they are considering or would consider?
Yeah, Josh has to. We got to swear him in if he's going to talk, or you can just give your name and address for the record.
Jose Hernandez, 1509 Rosewood.
Okay, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Okay, go ahead and share with us.
The circular driveway is an option, but we kind of rather to stick with the tree because it's the only one we have in our property, for shade and stuff like that. So
Okay, so that's why it's sounds like a non-starter.
kind of consider that.
Okay.
Yeah, but we do want to stay with this driveway because we got a 16-year-old son, so he uses that pad for himself. That's my wife's, and that's mainly mine because I go in and out with my dump trailers. I do construction, so it's kind of something we need.
I'm gonna go back to the.
Okay. Any questions? I say we move to discussion. And so if we can get a motion to approve, we're going to start with one motion, and we can always bifurcate that if we need to, if we want to vote on different things separately.
Move to approve.
We're going to move to approve 23-53, and we're actually only talking about, all they're asking for is
the last three.
The last 4. Oh, yeah, last 3.
Well, and the first one, right? The
first one, yeah.
The rear garage that exceeds the height of the house.
Right.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay, yeah. So, yeah, we'll get to discussion. Is there a motion on all those?
So moved.
Okay, all right. So what were we were gonna talk about, well, let's do this. You wanted to talk about whether or not is the tree worth it for y'all to not have a circle drive? Is the question I'd like to have answered. They would like to have a tree, and they'd like to have a mature tree, but that could change.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess once again, that's kind of a personal thing. For me, the tree is not something that I will hold that dear just because of its location. to my front of my house. I would want, if that tree did go down, I would want some substitution landscape to replace it. You know, just something to add to it. But that's just my fear of a tree that close to my house. So.
I mean, people cut down, I mean, I love my trees, and I don't want any of them to come down. But people cut down mature trees all the time because they're fearful of what that tree can do.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's just really figuring out which way you want to go with it and let them decide.
I would say, well, number one, I don't think the queuing question is even a question. I mean, I think Mr. Whitehead is right. The real intent of that, the 0 to 40, that you got to have, set it back 20 feet, I don't think that was meant for a single-family home.
I agree.
And it's on a minor street. You know, there's not going to be like cars whizzing back that you got to back in and all that.
Take that one off.
But the other thing to me is, they're either going to me, we should either have an agreement to reduce some of this pavement, or they lose the tree and go to the circular drive, because that's what they can do. I think we have to do one or the other. I don't think we can say because they have the tree, you know.
I thought the suggestion was made that they would do the ribbon on that far side with the green.
Those ribbons look bootleg.
I don't see a benefit of going back
Those
to
ribbons look terrible. And they don't get mowed in between it. I wouldn't want to be in favor of a ribbon.
Okay.
I know that they're supposed to be more environmentally friendly, but they usually look piss poor.
Okay.
I agree
My
wholeheartedly.
compromise was getting
Unless
rid
you
of
have a ribbon drive,
completely
then I'm sorry.
the left.
I mean, I could support the compromise of getting rid of the left one
That was my
completely,
compromise, getting completely rid
or
of
that big flare that goes out in front of the house completely, one or the other, that would be.
The pad.
So why don't we do this? Because I'm with you. I'd like to know who cares about the tree. Because if we don't have enough people that care about the tree and it's going to fail, then let's just get rid of the other thing and let them build whatever they want to build when they want to build it. But we have given variances based on trees before, when there's mature trees, and we don't want to build on this side, we want to build on that side. And so I don't think it's something we can discount. But if we don't care, we don't care.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to argue necessarily for it, but I do think it's something we could use.
Or I'm open for giving two options. One that involves the tree going away, which would be, tree goes away, obviously that dictates a circular drive. Or the tree stays, that dictates getting rid of one of these pads.
Pads, okay.
And they can choose whichever one. Both of them, I think, in my opinion, would be acceptable options. Get rid of the tree, make a circular pad, keep the tree. You got to sacrifice one of these parking pads.
So move.
So to restate that, you would grant them a variance for the parking pad so long as as long as that tree is there.
No, one of them would
long
have
as
to go,
they give up
one
a
of the
driveway.
pads, either on the left or the.
Yeah, and that's why I asked earlier, was the one on the
We're
right?
not giving them a choice at all. We're just saying no parking pad on the left side.
Yeah, and if you are against that, then
do
get
what
rid of
you
the tree.
do what you want to do in favor of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It becomes a by right situation, really.
It's their choice at the end of the day.
Yep.
That's what we're getting down to.
So so then we would say one of our conditions is the parking pad on the left side of the house shall be removed, as well as the curb cut and gate. Okay. We're not going to do anything. Just to be clear,
because we don't have to give them a by right option.
No, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Because it was asked in here, just to be clear, we're not giving a variance over the 5-foot side property lines because they've said they don't need that, but I'll come back. Well, let me come back to that one, sorry. We are not doing anything on detached carports. That has to go away as well because we're not going to grant a variance on that.
Correct.
And then he's not requesting the variance for the 75% based on his calculations.
Correct.
So we're not giving that variance.
Correct.
We don't agree with that We believe that's still a required variance.
You don't agree with that?
Correct, the calculation of the, sorry, Mr. Davis can answer that.
Because even if it doesn't have walls, it's still an accessory structure, right? Okay.
So the question then, do we want to grant that variance just in case? And the garage is pretty hidden back there.
I'm okay with the 75. I'm okay with that particular variance.
Me too.
All right, so we'll leave that in. Go ahead.
Can someone explain Mr. Whitehead's response? And I don't necessarily need his testimony again, but I know he gave a percentage of some parts that were open, some parts that were, I'm sorry, I was trying to recollect on what all of that was saying.
He's saying then, go right ahead.
Sure. So what Mr. Whitehead was saying is that approximately 40% of the rear garage will actually not be enclosed, this northern part, and it will remain carport / covered patio.
Okay.
But
That wouldn't go
we would,
into
like
it.
Mr. Ragsdale said, still consider that to count towards the 75% standard.
Okay. All right. And then, so let's go back to the very first variance. We're being told we don't need to talk about the 5 feet, so we can take that out. And then, does anyone have a trouble with the fact the garage is a little bit higher?
No.
I have a question on that. Mr. Ragsdale, is there administrative authority to approve that small of a difference in height?
No, there's nothing administrative that.
There is not? Okay.
What's the difference in height again?
He said about 16 inches, I think.
Okay.
And so by the midpoint, that was 8 inches.
So that was, I think, absolute to absolute and midpoint to midpoint.
Correct.
Technically, we measure it by the midpoint of the
To
roof,
absolute.
the principal structure, and the absolute height of the accessory structure. But either way, it's taller.
Right. And I did want to clear up that is how the principal structures are measured in here, but when we do look at accessory structures, we don't use that measurement because we're really looking at the accessory structure height. And so we look at the highest point of the principal and the highest point of accessory. I just was pointing that out as something that is, if anybody is kind of looking at those two sections.
So does anybody have any trouble with the height?
No.
All right, seeing none. So I'm going to go back through what we're doing here just one last time. So we're voting to approve a variance as to the height of the garage based on the height that is right now. We're not doing anything with the carport. We are granting the variance over the cumulative area of the accessory structures exceeding 75% of the total square footage of the house. We are, let me ask you one more question on that. With that 75%, was that including the carport that we're taking out as an accessory structure? Does that help us a little bit?
Yes.
It brings us closer to 75%. but I
Okay,
believe
we'll still grant
see-
that just in case. We are not allowing 2 front yard parking pads. We're not allowing 2 curb cuts. And then we're not allowing the 2 vehicular gates to be done because we're requiring the left side to be removed. And then let the chips fall where they may.
Can I clarify just a couple points?
Yes, sir.
Were you wanting to allow the northern curb cut, the flare, and the northern gate, or not allow either curb cut or either gate?
I would allow, under what I'm saying, the northern one is okay as is, so long as the southern one goes away, all of those items.
And remove the pavement or not?
I'm not in what I'm suggesting.
But
we're
they
in
would have a
discussion.
continuous fence and not a gate there.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The southern pavement on the
Yeah.
left side? Yeah, I would want that, all of that removed.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
curb cut pavement, all of it,
Okay.
under what we're being asked to do. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just point out, so the curb cut and gate would be allowed with the circular drive, but so.
I'm fully expecting them to build a circular drive and possibly never remove that.
Okay, but your condition said that the curb cut and gate would be removed. So I guess we just need to clear up, that's the intent, is that if there's no circular, if there's only a parking.
Unless a circular drive is built. If we need to add that's fine. I just figured since that was by right.
Yeah.
Then what I said was null.
The
but-
board could also consider a condition prohibiting a circular drive as well, if you're approving other variances on the site.
I wouldn't want to prohibit a circular drive because it's a viable option.
And it's by right typically, so.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Agree. Okay, so are we all in agreement? All right, Mr. Ragsdale, will you give us a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Bostic?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes. The standards of 9.22.6 of the UDC are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Chair Rand?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Mr. Ragsdale, are there any other cases today?
That's the last one?
And no announcements?